Jenny, thank you so much for being here today. Jenny Sager from Nextdoor. You're the managing director out of Australia, but you're from the United States originally. And she's also the host of Where Kindness Lives. It's a brand new podcast put on by Nextdoor. Thanks for chatting with me today.
So excited to be here.
Yeah. So I love the name of the podcast, Where Kindness Lives. It works perfectly with obviously kindness. And then you guys are a neighborhood where people live.
That is 100% true. So, our whole mission as a company is actually to cultivate a kinder world where everyone has a neighborhood to rely on. So, kindness is really at the core of everything that we do. And we do a lot both online and offline to breed kindness and hopefully make kindness contagious through communities all over the world.
So, first of all, before we talk about the podcast and about kindness, let's talk about the company itself. A lot of people have heard of it, but maybe people around the world who are listening right now don't know about Nextdoor. What is the company and what exactly do you guys do?
So, Nextdoor is the world's largest neighborhood network. We're actually in 11 countries, so the US and 10 other countries. And we connect you based on proximity. So, you sign up, it's free. We go through a confirmation process to double check your name and that you're a resident of where you say you actually live. And then once you're on, you're immediately connected to other people who live in the same area, in the same neighborhood. And the way that you use Nextdoor is really to receive trusted information. So that may be, safety updates or just information from your neighbors about things that are happening around the local community, to give and get help and really getting things done. And also, of course, building those real world connections with people who live nearby. Now, that could be neighbors, that could be your local businesses, that can obviously be some public agencies and services like emergency services and local government. But at heart, it was originally created to actually combat loneliness and to bring people back together at the community level, kind of like bringing back that conversation over the backyard fence. And our goal as a company is actually to help connect you online, but to make that translate into the real world so that you're developing a true, meaningful relationship offline.
And we'll talk about that in a little bit because on the several podcast episodes that I've listened to, you guys talk about that, which I think is really important, is combating loneliness and really beginning to reach out and talk to each other because we've gotten so into our phones and going inside and not talking anymore. And we'll talk about how important that is. And as a teaser, how many neighbors you should know in your neighborhood. So we'll talk about that because there is a specific number apparently according to a study. But on your podcast, one of the things you do off the top is you ask what kindness means to your guest or defining kindness. So I'm going to ask you that, what kindness means to you.
I think kindness is really being authentically, I'm trying not to use the word kind in the definition of kindness. It's tricky actually, but I think it's actually being authentically respectful and welcoming and empathetic towards each other. And when I say authentically, I think it means that it has to come from the heart. It has to come from within. So you're not forcing that. And although you can actually retrain yourself to be kind, at the same time it does need to be genuine. But I think for me it comes back to being respectful and welcoming and empathetic. And it's funny because I'm talking to you about this, and what you can't see is to my right is actually a board in my house that is our family values. I've got 3 young boys, and the first word at the top of our family values is kindness. And it's just something that it's really important to me to make sure is instilled in my kids, from day one.
And it's so true because I've always believed, and one of the reasons why I started Be Kind & Co. is that I really believe that kindness is a strength. A lot of people think that if you're kind, you sort of won't get ahead in life or you'll get mowed over or it's a weakness. But I really do it. And I've heard some of your guests and people that I've interviewed before say that it is, you have to work at it. Sometimes it doesn't come natural for everyone, but it is a strength. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. And I actually just spoke to one of our guests about this. And I love what she said, where she said, it's actually kindness is a superpower. And I think as women specifically, when you enter the workforce, it's almost like you're kind of trained from a younger age to be like a bit tougher. And, if you want to be in the same level as the men, you've got to kind of put up your guard and just be this strong woman. And I think you can be a strong person, but still be kind. And I think when you figure out how to do that in the right way, it truly is a superpower, whether that's at work or outside of work.
Do you think it's a practice? Is it something that you think people have to really work at?
I think so. I think even if I take myself as an example, I think I'm constantly learning not only the right ways to be kind or the ways that it matters more. And I don't want to give the misconception that you have to do some grand gesture, because it's not about doing something huge. And we've done a lot of research about this at Nextdoor and looking at small acts of kindness is what we say, which could be something as simple as bringing in your neighbor's mail or mowing their lawn when they don't ask you to, or literally just saying hello to somebody that you don't know when they walk by
That's
you.
simple.
Yeah, literally that simple, and the positive impact that has on people's mental health and well-being. And I think that's the part that it's almost like you have to get used to doing that again. And you mentioned technology and all of us getting a bit more disconnected when we're supposed to be uber connected right now. But I think that's why we have to retrain ourselves to do that, because it does feel funny sometimes to just like strike up a conversation with somebody you don't know on the street, or just go do a favor for someone, like bringing us, your neighbor flowers when they've gone through a tough time. Like if you're not in that rhythm, then getting back into that rhythm at first can feel a little bit strange. But as soon as you do it, it's so rewarding.
Yeah, just this week, I have a very large dog. And so the mailman, which we have a couple, we have a mail lady and a mail man who comes in. So they're very weary because Moose sounds like Cujo, but he's actually really nice. But so I finally was face to face with my mail lady, and I realized I didn't know her name. And so I said, "Hi, I'm Lou. And what's your name?" And she said, "Linda." Like, I don't think people ask, what's your name? And so 2 days later, I happened to see her on the street, just like you're saying, and saying hi. And I was like, and she was walking past me and was probably just not even thinking. And I said, "Hi, Linda." And I think I threw her off because she was like, "How do you know my name?" But it's just those little things like that yeah, I love that kind of stuff. It makes me happy.
It's so true. And it makes such a difference. You can see the other person's face light up right away. But you're right. It does also feel really rewarding for you. And again, looking at some of the research we've done, that's what the scientific research has found, is that benefit of the impact on your mental health and well-being wasn't just for the person receiving that act of kindness, it was for the person doing the act of kindness as well. And so it is really important and such a great reminder. Like your example is such a great example of doing something that seems small but actually makes such a big difference. And I think a lot of those things are what we lost during COVID. Like we went into this space where we were kind of in and out of all these rules of what you could and couldn't do. And people, were being told to socially distance. And it was like, we went almost backwards, where it was like, oh God, we were kind of getting used to putting ourselves out there again, but now we have to withdraw and go back inside again. And so I think it's even more challenging now for people to open up in that way, but that it's worth it. The reward is there once you do it.
You mentioned the pandemic, and I was just going to ask you about that. And even like a natural disaster we see all over the world, because people that listen to you guys, it's global. You mentioned Canada, Australia, the UK, United States. And when natural disasters happen, or even, during the pandemic, you see neighbors come together. You see people, strangers coming together and literally not doing nice things. They're doing kind things, just not thinking, what will this do for me? It's just sort of like they move into that space. But then all of that disappears, right? Like when the natural disaster is over or COVID is over, how do we continue that, right? As opposed to just looking at it when bad things are happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is one space that I feel really privileged to be able to see what's happening on Nextdoor, because it does make you realize, no, people are good and they're still doing the right thing, because we have not seen that decline globally since we've kind of all come out of COVID in our respective countries. We're still seeing it happen everywhere, where these acts of kindness and people still lending a helping hand. And I actually think COVID in some ways did that retraining for us, where if you were somebody who volunteered to, deliver your neighbors groceries when they were stuck at home with COVID or something like that, then COVID ended and you went, well, actually, that wasn't so hard to do. I can do something else for that same.
Uh-oh, you froze.
Growth has continued on that same trajectory, as has the activity on the platform. We didn't see a big decline there when that happened. But I think that the thing that COVID did do on the positive side was remind us how important those, what we and psychologists call weaker ties, are. So, you mentioned your mail woman, think about your hairdresser or the person who makes your coffee in the morning, or, all these kind of people that you have these little conversations with, but they're not really your friends, so to speak. Like you're not calling them up for, a chat when you're going through a tough time, yet you may sit in the hairdresser's chair and talk for 2 hours, and they probably maybe even know more about you than some of your friends do. But then when COVID happened, those are the relationships that got lost, right? And so I think it also was a good reminder of how important those conversations and those connections are. So yeah, really, really interesting.
And on Nextdoor, you guys also do the speaking of like the stories and the interaction. You share on the podcast too, actual stories of neighbors saying, "Can you believe that my neighbor did this?" Are they posting that on Nextdoor, or is that something you guys are putting out saying, "Tell us your stories"?
It's a little bit of both. So sometimes they do post the thank yous and share the stories on Nextdoor. Other times we'll, put out a call of send us a story about somebody in your neighborhood who you think is going above and beyond or has done something to show you kindness. So it's kind of a mixture, but they are true, 100% true stories of things that have happened in the Nextdoor neighborhoods.
Yeah, it's interesting because like on Yelp and things like that, you have a tendency, like when something bad happens, or if you have a bad experience at a restaurant, to go and like rah, 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 and type it all up. But when good things happen, you can write a thank you note to them maybe, but there's no. It's kind of cool. You can put that out there on Nextdoor.
Absolutely, and we do see that a
Shoot.
For example, there's a woman by the name of Kat that's in one of our podcasts. She was standing online in the grocery store and somebody in front of her just decided to pay for her groceries. And she said that it just completely just blew her away. It was like, again, a simple act, but something that was just mind blowing. And even hearing the story, right, you're a bit like, wow, someone paid for somebody else's groceries. But it was just a little act of kindness that this person did that day. And so she posted that on Nextdoor. She said, I don't actually didn't know the person. I'm hoping they're in the neighborhood. I just want to say a huge thank you because it made such a difference to my day and that it inspired me to pay for somebody's coffee later that day. Yes. And that is the piece that I think is our ultimate goal, is making that kindness flywheel happen, because we know that kindness is contagious. And I think when you see one person pay it forward, it definitely starts to happen and spread through the neighborhood.
Well, and the same, Jenny, when with negative energy, I'm a big believer in energy in the universe. And, especially you've lived in LA before. So, with traffic here, people can be, crazy or mean or cut people off or whatever, or honk at you if you're at the light. And I always say, I try to be like the nice, kind driver, because it does no good if you honk, like go, like, that's aggression in your heart. And then then those people feel bad. And so then that just starts the day off or afternoon or whatever for everyone. But if you can just like, I sometimes give them like 6 seconds. After 6 seconds, then I give the nice little toot toot on the horn. But, because I've been the one who's sitting there waiting, at the light. So it's just that energy. I feel like if you can just slow down and try to be kind as opposed to being reactionary and being negative, the positive and the kindness negates the negative.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting because, and I totally agree with what you're saying, but it's really interesting because when you add those pauses, like the 6-second breath that you just mentioned, and we actually do this in the Nextdoor product. So we have something we call the kindness reminder, which actually inserts a pause in product where if you're typing a post and you're potentially saying something offensive or something that we feel could violate our community guidelines, you get served the kindness reminder.
That is brilliant.
And it says, hey, Lou, it actually looks like maybe you're not about to be kind. And maybe you're about to say something that could potentially be offensive. And what we found was that more than 30% of those of people who receive that actually then just delete the post or edit what they're saying. So you're 100% right that if you can take that pause, it actually makes you think about, well, hold on a minute. Like, am I really doing something that's that nice, or should I rethink this? And it's just that little step, that little pause makes such a big difference.
Oh my gosh, that was such a good idea. Next to the idea of you starting the podcast, that little kindness reminder thing is actually pretty cool.
So well, that was my idea. Kindness reminder was not my idea, but I agree.
Yes, right. Somebody's idea. So let's go back to what we were talking about off the top. You interviewed, I think last name was McKay. He's a psychologist.
Yes.
Yes. He seemed really cool and was very knowledgeable. He talked, and you did as well, to know how many neighbors for our mental health.
Yes. So we did a big research study globally with scientific researchers around the world looking at neighborly connections and the impact that they drive on mental health. And one of the things that we set out to do was really to quantify, okay, how many neighbors do you need to connect with in your neighborhood before you start getting that positive impact? Mm-hmm. Because we know anecdotally this is happening, right? We see this everywhere around the world where people are sharing these stories about, I was depressed or I was lonely, and then my neighbor took me out for coffee and now I feel amazing and I have all these friends. So we know the stories are there, but we wanted to really be able to quantify that number. And what we found through this research was that the number was only 6. So if you can actually make 6 connections in your neighborhood. And when I say connections, I don't mean just, online connections. I mean, saying hello to 6 people in your neighborhood, or just building those relationships with 6 people in your neighborhood. That's when you start to actually get the positive impact on your mental health and well-being, and actually reduce those feelings of loneliness, but also reduce feelings of stress, and stress when it's directly related to health and finances. So, the stress we all feel sometimes about work and bills hanging over your head or mortgages or whatever, if you can just connect with 6 people in your neighborhood, you actually will start to reduce those feelings of stress, which is pretty powerful and pretty amazing.
Have you guys also seen, like, what are some people doing? I know I work in TV news, and when it's really hot here, I always remind 2 things. Check on your elderly neighbors, just in case, right, for fans, maybe they don't have air conditioning, just make sure they have everything. And then also just, remember, the dogs, if a dog is kept outside, to make sure that they have water. But what other ways can neighbors really check on one another without it feeling like more work on your list, right?
Or without you maybe feeling like you're kind of overstepping boundaries or something like that. So one thing that I recommend is you keep an eye out for little signals in the neighborhood. So for example, you may have a neighbor who all of a sudden you notice their mail's kind of piling up or something like that. Or, in my own neighborhood, the gentleman across the street from me, he puts a different flag up every day. And so he has flags from all over the world, and he puts a different flag up every day. And there was a week where we noticed that the flag hadn't changed, and we were like, what's going on? He's elderly. And we were like, is something going on with him? And we went across the street, and honestly, we don't know him very well. We've only been living in this neighborhood for a year. So we're kind of just starting to get to really know our neighbors here. But we went over there, and he said, I've been diagnosed with cancer. It's pretty far along. I've been at the doctor's. And so that little symbol of the flag not being changed in a week just prompted us to go over there and have a chat with him. And we discovered all of this that he was going through. And so I think keeping an eye out for some of those little signs. I know one of the guests I spoke to mentioned that her neighbor hadn't brought in the garbage cans. You bring your garbage out for the garbage trucks, and hers hadn't been taken back in. And so very similar, she went over and took the garbage cans back in, and then knocked on the door and was like, is everything okay? And similarly, that neighbor had, I think, if I remember correctly, broken their leg or something, and just needed help. So I think keeping an eye out for those little signs around. And then I think also, again, just remembering that, like, everybody's waiting for somebody else to take the first step. Like, everyone wants somebody to say hello to them, or just to reach out and open up that door of conversation. But everyone's kind of waiting for someone else to do it. And if you're actually the person who does it first, I 100% guarantee you that it will be welcomed back with open arms. It never happens where you put yourself out there and the person goes, oh, no, I don't
Yes.
like, please don't say hello to me. I don't want to talk to you, you know? And so I think just take that pause, take that deep breath, and remember, like, you are going to be met with an amazing reception.
As we wrap things up, what we just had a story this week about mental health and depression and stress in young girls and guys, like high school and even college. And it just made me so sad that COVID, made them sad, but it's still around, right? So how, as Nextdoor and with this podcast, what are some ideas for youth in the neighborhoods?
In regards to how they can help
Yeah,
other
how
people,
can they
or
help out? What could they do?
yeah, I mean, I think one thing that's actually really exciting for younger neighbors like that, especially high school kids, like you mentioned, is we see a ton of high school kids actually earning extra money on Nextdoor. So they are literally helping neighbors and actually making money back for it.
Oh,
Sometimes that's kind of traditional tasks around the neighborhood, like mowing neighbors' lawns or just doing tasks like that. But for example, there's a boy by the name of Robert, who's actually only 13, who was really into computers. If anyone in the neighborhood has something they need fixed, like, I'm pretty good with it, I'll fix it for you. He's making like $300 a week
wow.
right now off of neighbors in the area that just need little bits and pieces helped with computers. So I think actually, if you're a teenager, like, think creatively, put yourself out there, dog walking, things like that. You could actually earn a good amount of cash on
Yeah.
next. But if that's not one of your long-term goals, like, again, it's not really that any different for the younger kids. Like, look out for those neighborhood signs. There are people, we hear so many stories, for example, about neighbors, single moms that have a bunch of kids and nobody to look after them, or parents that need help, like getting a math tutor or something like that. And so just look for those parents that are struggling in the neighborhood or may need an extra hand, or just help somebody carry their groceries. Like, there's so many things you can do. You don't have to, again, plan for that grand gesture.
It's just a daily thing, one day at a time.
One day at a time. One little small act of kindness at a time.
Yeah. And then, so where can we find the podcast?
The podcast is on all of your streaming platforms. So Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, Amazon, like literally anywhere where you get your podcast. It's called Where Kindness Lives. Guests from all over the world, all walks of life, celebrities, business thought leaders, chefs, singers. I mean, the list goes on, but at heart, these are all people who are dedicating a piece of their lives on the kindness journey, and really inspiring people, I would say, too. And one thing that I really love is they've all been really, really great at just sharing their own personal journeys and giving practical tips of really things you can apply as soon as you're done listening, things you can do to make a difference in your own life, and also be kinder to yourself. And that is so important too. Like, don't forget to be kind to yourself. Treat yourself.
Yes, that is a great way to end this interview. It is so important. A lot of times we think be kind to other people, but you've got to remember to be kind to yourself. I call it loo time. My girlfriends call it loo time. Sometimes you just got to stop and breathe and do something nice to yourself. And that voice in your head, flip that thing.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Really, really, really nice to meet you. Congratulations on the podcast. I'll keep listening, even though you're all the way in Australia and I'm all the way over here. I feel like I know you now. So kindness sisters, but I really appreciate it, Jenny. And we'll tell everyone where they can listen to Where Kindness Lives, brought to you by Nextdoor.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Have a beautiful day.